Hey guys, welcome back to Luke's Garage. Today is a beautiful day. It is hot and it's finally cooling down. And I have a problem with the Blazer. As always, there's always something wrong with this stupid thing. Anyways, today I've been trying to think for a little while how to start this video. Hint, hint. The Blazer won't start and it clicks, and I know it's the starter. So what we're going to do today is show you how to remove a starter on just about any vehicle. We'll bench test the one that's on there currently just to show you why it doesn't work, and I'll also test the one on the truck just sitting out there to show you how it sounds when a starter's bad. So without further ado, let's get to letting you hear why this thing won't start. Okay, if you ever get in your vehicle and turn your ignition on and it clicks like so, in my experience 90% of the time it's a bad starter. What I'll do is put the camera right next to the starter so you can hear this noise up close to it, and then we'll move in and take the old one off and bench test it. Changing out a starter can be a very simple, easy project to do that most anybody can take on with basic tools. So the tools that you will need, you'll need a basic set of sockets, a ratchet, maybe some extensions, and what you're going to be doing is, you'll need your sockets for this little guy, this post, and what this post is for is your ignition wires, and then what this post is for is your 12-volt constant. So you'll need sockets for the associated size to make that happen, and then you'll also need your third socket for your mounting bolts, which mount your chassis to the motor. So the very first thing you want to do is remove your negative battery terminal to take the power off the starter, because the starter is energized and we need to remove the wires. So we'll take that, move that aside. So you want to locate your starter. Mine is right here. It's on the passenger side, underside of this vehicle. This is on a 1984 GMC Jimmy. And for the most part, they all look the same. They mount a little bit different, but these ground, to the chassis, and then you have your power coming in. So this big black wire, and then you have your wires coming in from your ignition. So there should be two sets that you want to pull off of these terminals on the solenoid. And then what you do is generally there's two bolts, depending on where they're at. You can look at your new starter to see where the mount holes are, just so you know which bolts are taken off. This one, the starter weighs about 20 pounds. So as you take this off, you want to be careful that it doesn't fall on your face. But what we'll do first is remove these wires, and then we'll take these two bolts off, and this starter should come off. So with a 14mm socket, you just undo the bolt that was holding these two guys on and push those out of the way. And then there's also a female plug wire here that's going on to the solenoid as well. And I might actually have to take the solenoid off to get that wire off. There's one bolt. There we go, it just flops right out of there. Now that we have our old starter off the truck, it is a good time to compare the new part with the old part. And I always just do a side by side. It's pretty obvious to tell with these parts that they're exactly the same. Same everything, same mounting holes. So these two holes right here and here, same spots. We have the same part, so that's a good thing. What I'm going to do now is hook this old starter up to my battery. I'll show you guys how to do that just to bench test this and see how well it functions. So we'll cut over and test this old starter out. When bench testing a starter, you want to hook up your positive to your solenoid, and then you want to hook up your negative to the chassis, because this actually grounds via chassis. And so one thing I noticed right away is that this post should not have all this play in it, so that might have been a pretty big culprit in why this wasn't working properly. But we'll still test it out, so we'll hook up our positive. And then we will hook up the negative side. You want to make sure you have it a good lock on your negative side. You don't want that slipping off while it's testing. And then what we'll do is I'll show you how to hook this up to your battery. So when bench testing a starter, always want to have your safety glasses on very first thing. So we will put those on. And the next thing you want to do is take your jumper cables, and you want to take your negative and connect it to the chassis of the starter. And then you also want to connect your positive, your 12 volt constant, to the post. And again, we'll leave this as is to test it. That post should not be wiggly like that. And then what you want to do is connect your positive to your battery, and then your negative obviously to your battery as well. And then what we'll do is take a screwdriver, and we will make a jump from this post to this guy. So this is where your ignition would be hooked onto. And what that'll do is energize solenoid, making this spin. Depending on what's wrong with it, I would assume that just because that post is wiggly, that's causing some of my issues in the starter. Might not actually be bad, but we'll test it. So what I'll do is mount this camera on this tripod and show you up close what it looks like. Now that you have all of your cabling hooked up properly, what you want to do is, I'll show you guys right here, this 12 volt post should not be moving that much. So I would assume that this jam nut backed its way out, and that's one of my main culprits, but we'll try it as it is. And what you want to do is jumper this 12 volt constant post to your ignition post, so that the starter thinks that it's on the vehicle and that you're telling it to turn on. So what I'll do is hook up my jumper cable, my little tiny alligator jumper clip. It's kind of hard with this thing being so floppy. It shouldn't be that way. And then we'll hook our positive back up. And then what I'll do is just touch this. Yeah, I think a lot of it's real chattery, but trying to energize, but it shouldn't sound like that, and I bet a lot of it is because this terminal, this jam nut, isn't locked down all the way. I think the starter isn't very good to begin with, but that's definitely not supposed to be that way. So we'll hook up our power again. Yeah, I think that this starter is shot. We will I'll zoom in and show you what it's doing, where the gear action is happening. And it's not smooth. It's bouncing everywhere, jumping all around. So here you go, a little close-up angle of what it's looking like. Yeah, it should not be bouncing around that much. That's not a normal function of this part. I'll try it one more time. So what we'll do is bench test the new one just to compare, to make sure it's not the guy operating this contraption that's messing this up. But I'm pretty positive that this guy, yeah, isn't good anymore, just based on what I'm seeing and hearing. Here is the new starter hooked up, and we will energize it. Yeah, much smoother, much nicer, not chattery. This is how it should look. So I'm convinced that my old starter is bad. So what we'll do now is disconnect all this stuff, and we will get the vehicle prepped for this new starter to go in place, and I'll show you guys how to install that. When mounting your starter, you always want to bring it up, and then this end fits right up in here against your flywheel. You'll kind of hold it in place with one hand, and you can run one of your mounting bolts up in there and hand thread it into place, and that will kind of hold the starter in place so you can start to make sure your wiring is all hooked up. So what we want to do is move up here, and here we have our ignition wire, so I'm going to want to clean these off, and then we also have our 12-volt constant. So what I'll do right now is clean those off with just some Brakleen. So here is how your wiring should look. You should have 3 wires going to your 12-volt constant pole, and then if I can get up in here to this little guy right here, there's a single wire coming down right here going to it, and you can't really mess up where they go. The actual connection points, there's 2 large holes for this guy and then 1 small one for that other wire. So very easy to remember, and in case you forget, always take pictures before you disassemble something. And now what we'll do to finish this install is tighten up these 2 housing bolts. So get those cranked down, and then we'll turn this motor over and see how it starts up and see how it sounds. Okay, now for the big test. Fires right up. Very cool.